Good morning, everybody. I think we will start the real business after the inaugural session. And this is the first panel session of this 2 days conference. And the theme of this panel session is Outlook and Developments, Global, Regional, and National. We are having a very eminent and expert team of personalities from all over the world, and they represent individually different aspect of this industry and connected directly or indirectly with the theme of this session or the name of this session, that is the oil spill 2022. So oil spill, they are from upstream operations, downstream operations, shipping and maritime industry. The persons we call responder, like Indian Coast Guard, they respond. Then there are experts from the spill response group, the insurance companies, the funding company for handling this kind of massive operation. So it's a beautiful mix of different expertise from different part of the world, representing the best of the institutions and the best of the companies. So with that background and with the theme that is outlook and development from a global aspect, national aspect, and regional aspect, we'll start today's session. I will first go to my friend, Mr. S.K. Majumdar, who is representing one of the national upstream oil company, ONGC, and operating in offshore for the last almost 46 years. The company is 46 years operating in offshore, and Majumdar is connected at least last 34 years with that. So he is having a huge experience, and he is also having another expertise. He is a pipeline expert, subsea pipeline expert. And we have seen a lot of oil spill happen due to the leakage in the subsea pipelines. They are not as huge as a tanker leakage, but yes, there is spillage. So he is well accustomed with this term and with the containment, preparedness, and also I will go to Mr. Majumdar with his comment that being representing ONGC, which is producing at least 14 million metric tons from Western offshore over a period of time, how prepared you were to handle any kind of oil spill, or you are drilling a number of wells, so if some blowout happens, as it happened earlier in some gas wells in Bombay High, how you are going to handle it with the present circumstances. Over to Mr. Majumdar.
Thank you, sir.
Your time limit is 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Sengupta, sir. And first of all, thank you, OSI 2022, for giving me this opportunity to be here and speak on this outlook. Before I reply to the questions posed by the moderator, I'll just bring out a couple of things up front. Because if you look about the outlook, where the oil spill management comes into force, because there is a spillage of oil. And the spillage of oil will happen only when you use it. And who is the biggest user? If you talk in terms of the global consumption, India is the third largest energy consumer. And despite being the third largest energy consumer, our energy consumption, per capita energy consumption is only 1/3. And with almost 260 million tons, million barrels of, 260 million tons of oil that we'll be consuming in the current year, there's almost 5.15 million barrels that have been told. The 4.15 is almost getting imported, that is 85%. So whether we are producing or we are importing, in both the scenarios, the oil is getting transported either through the pipeline or through tankers from overseas or within our country. And this consumption is going to increase. And this consumption will increase where? Where there is more population, where per capita consumption is more. Europe is saturating. China growth is going down. So it's the developing countries where there will be more and more energy demand. More and more energy demand means more and more consumption of oil. No matter how much we talk about the green fuel, so much is being told about, and it is so much about cleaner fuel, greener fuel. But the dependency on the crude oil is not going to go down drastically. If you see the next 30 years projection, even in the percentage terms, the crude oil dependency may go down. But if you see the absolute term, it is still on the rise. So as long as we continue to consume crude oil, the hazard associated it with will continue to be with us. So how do you handle it? As has been said that Western offshore is producing around 14 million tons of oil every year. And most of it is being transported through pipeline. There is a huge network for pipeline. Almost 700 pipeline segments are there. And there are 8 trunk pipelines which carry oil and gas from our offshore installations to shore terminals either at Uran or at Hazira. The question comes, what happens in case there is a leakage in the pipeline? How well prepared we are to meet those oil spills? So we have an oil spill contingency plan because it was promulgated by ICG, Indian Coast Guard, way back in 2015. But much before that, in 2002, we had an oil contingency plan which is in force in ONGC. And there are various tiers of oil spill management. We have quantified it, say it up to 700 tons of oil spill, we categorize it in the tier 1. And the tier 1, ONGC itself, with their own resources, is capable of containing and mitigating those spills. The moment it goes beyond 700, up to 10,000 tons, that is our tier 2. The tier 2 is where the Indian Coast Guard and all associated companies, the national resources are to be used. And if it is more than 10,000, then we are a member of OSRL, where we'll be taking their support. So it's not about only containing, because there are 3 stages of operation. You see there is operational issues, whether it's marine or there is shore-based at Uran, or it is the logistics, because there is a huge logistic involved in it. Once you contain the oil, then you have to recover it, and then I have to carry it back to the shore, and finally mitigating. So all these 3 areas, there is a huge opportunity to bring in more technology, to bring in more collaboration. The moment we talk about oil spill, the first action that we must take is how to prevent it, because there is nothing better than prevention. So the technology comes and play a big role here. We can go for leak detection system. We have been inducting it in the downstream pipelines. But as upstream pipelines are concerned, there are big question marks because the trunk lines are carrying inputs from multiple locations. And those, there is a pressure temperature variation along this route of the pipeline. Managing a leak detection system in those pipelines is a big issue. So I'll ask the industry experts to come forward and guide us how to implement those leak detection system in the upstream industry, in the trunk pipelines, or even for that matter, well-fueled pipelines. Secondly, in case there is a leakage, how well we are prepared to first quantify those leakages. So whether we have modeled it, that if there is a small leakage of, say, 1-inch diameter leakage, or there is a pipeline rupture, what kind of consequences may be. So in our Indian Western offshore, we have done various modeling, and we have found out that the leakage, maximum leakage that can occur in our biggest of the trunk pipelines, that can go as high as 6,000 cubic meter. When you talk about 6,000 cubic meter, that too is a very conservative figure. We have considered that the pumps will be stopped within 10 minutes. But in fact, when the line ruptures, the pressure goes down so fast, and our inbuilt systems are so effective, the line will be shut down within a couple of minutes. And if that happens, the quantity of leakage will be much, much lesser. So the pipeline, even we may be questioning that there are a lot of leakages. Most of the well-flued pipelines, they are smaller in dia, and the leakages are so minimal that, in fact, we don't need any remediation. We don't need any oil spill management there, because they are away from the shoreline, and the natural bioremediation takes place, and it doesn't affect our shorelines. The biggest challenge will be, obviously, the blowout from the rigs. So that is one area where this quantum may cross 10,000. We have to always remember one thing: any leakage, any spillage that happens, it is because either we have not maintained the integrity of the system, or we have not followed the SOPs. So we have to be very careful that whatever infrastructure we have a robust system in place to maintain the integrity, frequent checks. Whenever there is a drop in pressure in any of the lines, we have got our system. The acoustic survey is being carried out to find out whether there is any leakage, so that we can arrest the leakage right in the beginning, nipping in the bud. And then, in case it goes beyond, that proper communication needs to be established. If you can quantify the leakage through your modeling, you know that this line has ruptured, or there is a leakage, there is a blowout. This was the quantity that I am expecting that will be spilling over. So activating various contingency plan, whether in-house or where you want to bring in the partners, the Tier 2, in our case, the Indian Coast Guard, who will be the leading, or the OSRL, because time is a big constraint here. No matter we have a 24/7/365 agreement with OSRL, but then the resources that we need to have, that will to bring to the site, it will have its own time. So we have to really think that whether we can have a setup here in India which can cater to India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, so that we don't lose time in bringing the things from Singapore to India. So that is one thing I'll be expecting OSRL to look upon. And then communication with the local affected parties. That is one area, because we all know the fisheries. This is one of the most affected parties because the mammals and the marine life, they may not be shouting at us that their life is in danger. But definitely the local fishermen whose livelihood is dependent on fishery, and if the oil spill reaches the shoreline, so they make a lot of hue and cry. So before these things are blown out of proportion in the local media and it is politicized, it is our duty to educate the local affected parties that mitigation measures that we are taking, and it is a corporate social responsibility that we should take up to educate the possible affected parties well in advance.
Okay, Mr. Majumdar, I think
Thank you, sir.
we have to go to other speakers as well, and you have already touched upon very important points. from the Indian context. Thank you very much. I will quickly go through Mr. Panikkar. Mr. Prashant Panikkar is currently Director and Head Refinery of Naira Energy Limited, and previously he was in BPCL refineries. Their refinery is the second largest single refinery in India, if I am not wrong, and they are in the coastal areas. We all know that India right now is the third largest importer of crude oil, and it may be 250 plus million metric ton per year. And the way the country is developing, it may recover more crude oil in future. So, and a majority of this crude oil is coming to the coastal refineries. So from that point of view, Mr. Panikkar, as a refinery man, as a receiver of such a huge amount of crude oil, your refinery itself is a big refinery. How you perceive the preparedness in this sector from the technology point of view, from your regional or national preparedness and response time from your concept?
Thank you. First of all, let me express our gratitude to the organizers for this opportunity, and thank you, the moderator, for the question. Very apt question. India is going to be the place where we are going to handle a lot of crude oil and petroleum products in the near future. One thing very happy is that in the last 20-25 years, compared to the volume of oil that we handle through ocean tankers, the spill has considerably come down. The data has been presented today in the inaugural, in the video. Very, very happy note because of the collaboration, technological improvement, the passion, commitment, and also the involvement of state, legal issues, and the cost of cleanup. That is good thing. But the problem going forward, concern for refiners like us, even if the leak is small, spill is small, we have got a great concern because one, the sensitivity of the issue. Many of our coastal line is already eco-sensitive, marine national park, and very highly sensitive places. Even the small spill will have multiple impact, environmental impact, cost impact, the brand impact, so many issues would be there. So you're very conscious that we have to operate without any spill. If you look at what is going to happen in our country for the next 10 years, for example, globally, most of the oil now moving towards Asia, majority, proportionately more, and especially to India. As my co-panelist has just said, we need a lot of refining capacity, we need a lot of oil as we move forward. If everything goes smooth, we would require at least 50 to 60 percentage more capacity in the next 10 to 15 years. That is the type of oil we have to handle. At the same time, our knowledge about spill, what are the consequences of spill, the activism, the media, and also the truly the population, the impact, the urbanization issues, and consequent concentration of people in wherever we have got our refineries and those type of facilities. So the impact is extremely high even if spill is low. I recently read an article saying that 50% of the major spill are happening while the tanker is in motion in the open sea. But for the medium spill, everything is happening. Actually, good percentage is happening while the tanker is discharged to a refinery or to another tank farm location. So that is the concern. There are many experts to talk about what would happen if a spill happens in the open sea. But let me concentrate on what would be the consequence if it is happening at a discharge location inside the refinery. Our refinery is in Vadinar, as the moderator rightly said, the second largest single location refinery. We have got an SPM in operation since 2007. And so far, we were able to operate without any oil spill. But the concern continues to be there. First concern that we have got is as we move forward, the global warming impact on the weather, the predictability is very, very low. We don't know what is going to happen. Recently, you might have read in global, in one of the places, while discharging a tanker to the refinery, it was got disconnected and created a huge spill 1 or 2 months back, I was told, because of a volcanic eruption under the sea. Unpredictability of these type of environmental impact or climate change related issues are going to be more as we move forward. In Vadinar, from our SPM, I can see at least 5, 6 more SPMs, a very, very rare sight. SPMs of almost all the oil companies of India are there at Vadinar, a very sensitive location, which means that a major spill from one of the SPMs will definitely impact large number of SPMs and would impact the oil availability in the country. That it is sensitive. Even though we can take proud that we were able to reduce the spill in the last 20, 25 years, but the consequence of a spill has multiplied manifold in the last 10 years. That is going to be more as we move forward. My suggestion to the specifically to his question, I have a view that the industry, that tanker operations group, Coast Guard, and all the agencies, including the legal, the insurance agencies, all has to come closer and closer, need more and more efforts to ensure that one, prevention, technology for prevention and response in the event of any spill happens. In the inaugural meeting, it was said, today it is a local response, tomorrow it is a national response, and third day it is a global response. How we can ensure that this global response and national response would be available to us in time? Because if the spill is not immediately contained, the consequences are huge because the population has gone up. And you know that our knowledge about the spill also has gone up in the last 10 years. The health consequence, the marine life. So, though we are quite comfortable that the spill has been reduced, but I would say that the consequence of the spill is equal to what happened 25 years. So my only thing is that my suggestion is, this is such platforms to deliberate and come to clear understanding about the response. We also have Tier 1 facility, Tier 2 facility, and also depending more on Coast Guard for the immediate response. The Coast Guard has got a big setup in Vadinar because of the considering the importance of the area. But we have to find out how much, as a team, we would be able to collaborate, contain in the event of a thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Panikkar. You have really brought out the kind of response for that, and you spoke about the I think the collaboration part, which actually in our theme synergy is there, because otherwise, and how early we can detect it and contain it, because otherwise it will be a major havoc in not only in the regional, in the national space. So. Whenever we talk about this word spill and the terminology used by Mr. Panikkar, response, we remember the company OSRL, because they are the pioneer in responding the oil spill throughout the world. Mr. Darren Waterman is here with us, an expert and director OSRL from Asia Pacific. Daryl, we all know about your response time, the kind of technology you are using. Some of the Indian companies are having long-term collaboration with you to whatever the tier of the kind of spill is there. But what are the latest technology you can bring out for the containment, for the response, and how fast you can address it? So we'd like to hear from you, Darren.
Thank you for the question. So yes, I think the key part of that question was about technologies. What's evolved, what's new that helps us deal with a response. And I think it's fair to say largely the key methodologies for dealing with an oil spill have remained unchanged. So we all know about the use of dispersants. We know about containing and recovering oil spills with booms and skimmers, or using booms to collect the oil and then burn it off. And all of those things are still absolutely important and make up really key parts of any response capability. And of course, there's been evolution of those equipment and technology over time, and it's generally, it is an evolution, not a step change. So, you know, when you talk about skimmers, there's improvements in efficiency. When you talk about booms, there's improvements in how quick they can be towed through the water. Dispersants, you know, over the years have become more biodegradable and less damaging. So that's all really, really positive stuff. But I think technology that's really evolved in recent years has been more around how we gain better situational awareness. And that's, of course, using technology such as apps. You know, everyone in the field can record data, can send it almost instantaneously to the incident command team. You have lots of ways of providing information, whether that's through aerial surveillance, satellite surveillance, drones such as aerial vehicles or surface remote vehicles or subsea gliders. And all of that really, really helps in providing information. And of course, information is critical to making good decisions. You can't make good decisions without information. So I think that situational awareness is where we see the greatest steps that aid oil spill response. So it's bringing that information very quickly to the people that can make the decisions. But not only bringing the information there, but how it's presented in a logical way that provides, because you can be overloaded with data and overloaded with information. So how is that presented, visualized, and given across to the team that make the decisions very, very quickly and readily? So that's where the key technology changes are. As I say, and that could be the use of drones, other sensors on satellites, you know, subsea gliders that are able to take measurements within the water column to look at the natural dispersion and things like that. That's really, really important. So I think that technology piece that brings information to the incident management team is where we see the greatest developments recently. Other things are maybe quite simple tools that help you manage an oil spill or any other kind of emergency event. And the pandemic has really seen this evolve, which is remote incident management. So traditionally, when you have an emergency situation, you typically have an incident management team that's sat in a room, and they're, you know, sat around some screens and working together and making decisions. But actually, through the pandemic, that's really driven us and driven the whole industry to look differently, because you didn't necessarily have the ability to bring everyone together, whether that's nationally or internationally. And there are a lot of tools out there that allow for remote incident management. Yes, you still need people in a room, but you can have a team on the other side of the world that's looking at developing part of your incident action plan, making the assessments on environmental impact, looking at the logistics side. We don't need people sat in a room together. And there are a lot of tools now that facilitate that remote incident management. And you can have a blended approach where you have people in a room as well as other teams situated other places nationally, internationally, that really complement that incident management setup by adding extra resources and extra capability and extra knowledge that's instantaneously accessible, but you can all see the same information, work on the same documents, the same plans at the same time. So I think that's another thing that's really, really important, is that ability to bring people together even though you're not physically located in the same place. And I think then when we talk about an actual response, the other thing that I think we will see added to response tools, if you like, isn't something that's new, but it hasn't really evolved to become a known and used strategy, and that's the use of a chemical which is called a herder. They've been around for a long time, but actually there's been very little use of them, and I think we probably will see in the coming years more adoption of these chemicals called herders. So of course, as we know, when oil is spilt on the sea surface, one of the first things that it does is it fragments, and the key slick breaks up into these small slicks and spreads out over a large area. And that's, of course, a challenge, because if you're trying to recover it, it's spread out very thin, it's over a large area. If you're trying to spray dispersants, you need to try and then target specific areas. But a herder chemical is something that can be used in very, very low concentrations, and it helps bring the slick back together or reduces its propensity to fragment in the first place. So then you can target your response efforts directly at high concentration areas. So the idea is it basically improves the efficiency of existing response tools. So I think we will probably see more use and adoption of herders moving forwards. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, because all the, I think, organizations, they look at you for the advancement and of the technology. And number two, to reduce the response time as much as possible. That's very, very important, the response time. Because Mr. Panikkar has just mentioned that how fast you can address it, that's the key point here. So thank you, Mr. Darren. Now we'll come to Mr. Suresh, who is the Deputy Director General Operational Coastal Security, Indian Coast Guard. Had a huge experience, 30 years experience, all over the world he has moved, and whenever, at least in India, if there is oil spill, we first remember Indian Coast Guard and dial the number. So they are at our rescue every time. But this, I think he understands there are a lot of environmental issues and there are environmental management structure. And if there is some international environmental management structure, do you think that it needs a reform with the current situation, or is there any challenges in that, or what will be the future solutions?
Before I start, I want to thank the chair and the experts in the audience, with particular reference to the presence of Inspector General S.P. Sharma, retired, of Indian Coast Guard, from whom we all learnt our basics. Sir, I respect you and acknowledge your presence. Gentlemen, pardon me if I overshoot this 5 minutes by a minute or two, because starting from 0900 this morning, everything is basically revolving and boiling down to the response strategy at the end of the day. So, to begin with, the Honorable Prime Minister of India, he gave us a slogan of security and growth for all in the region, which encompassed the complete Indian Ocean region, including the issues of environment. I say this because we have made excellent responses to many of our neighbors, because pollution response is not affordable by one and all. It's to be very well understood. And India, the way it is placed in the Indian Ocean, India is expected to be in its regional and international role as much as it is expected to be in its national role. Further, I also want to say that equally important is this new concept of Atmanirbhar, wherein we have to look at self-sufficiency as well. With these small little backdrops, let me tell you all, it's time that Oil Spill India 2022 should start to think of oil and chemical spill India hereinafter, because already the documents for chemical spill responses are there. Indian Coast Guard is expected to draw out response strategies, and it is even more challenging. I also want to bring to fore that prevention, response, and rehabilitation are three very important factors. Prevention, very much from the morning, zero tolerance is the word with which they want to prepare themselves even for exploratory agencies. So that means the prevention is at its best, but still, It's also brought out from, it is brought out that from the time of Torrey Canyon till Deepwater Horizon, accidents will happen. And therefore, we have to prepare. And more than the preparation to respond is how the rehabilitation will take place. Oceans are too large. We cannot blindly act without economy of effort as well. This morning, the director offshore of ONGC made a mention in which he gave us the representations of how oil spills have come down from the year 1990s till 2022. At the same time, we need to stock up to respond to ensure that the environment is protected. Climate consciousness world over is growing day by day, and oceans are key contributors to this. Therefore, we will buy equipments, we will have dispersants, but we'll never use them. So then how is it going to happen? It's a very important thing we have to think through as a nation. I also want to bring to fore that today we are seeing the industry here. We are seeing a response agency here. But we have to see the transporters also there as one of the constituents in the whole gamut. An exploratory field can have an oil spill, but then the ships in transit over the oceans are equally responsible. I also want to bring to fore that when the onshore was being spoken about, he spoke about his refinery and its SPMs. We have to understand that all this is once again connected to security and spill, and it's a responsibility. How it's going to happen? Mr. Mazumdar started off by telling us about 700 tons as tier 1. In this audience, I want to ask, with the way we have progressed in transportation of the oil and its refinements and its utilization, well, is it 700? And for 700 tons, if you are prepared and if you are expecting a response from somebody else to come and respond beyond that, I think you are late. The response planning for tier 1 and 2 and 3 has to be on what is the type of oils you are going to process, how is it going to be responded to, what is that quantity which will not affect your NEBA in that area, has to be thought through by each one of us. Why is it to be documented as a numerical value? Can't we think that in my port, these are all the oils coming, especially, take for example Mauritius, VLFSO. What was the amount of spillage? But then what was its impact? Therefore, we have to prepare for our NEBA vis-a-vis the oil spill, and therefore what should be our response strategy of tier 1. And also we should know in our mind how fast beyond that the support will come from all the agencies which are in and around us. How much they are spaced, what is their equipment availability. If we don't have our proper plan in place, then these numerals will let us down and we will be responsible for the public outcry. So I think this is a very conscious point each one of us has to think through, especially to the chair who will be summing up on all the findings which we would have. And therefore, gentlemen, now let me come to more specifically the topic of outlook and development for national, regional and international necessities. Indian Coast Guard is a coordinator for national oil spill response in India, but also the competent national authority for South Asia, in which we have 5 nations, and they are our neighbors: Pakistan, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, India. Our DG SASAP is also amongst the audience today. I met him in the morning as well. You all are aware of the incidents of MT New Diamond, which happened off Sri Lanka, or Wakashiko, or Express Pearl, and many such incidents. In fact, Express Pearl was a chemical spill. even beyond oil spill. And therefore, in this whole process, as National Oil Spill Disaster Contingency Response Agency and planners, we have to understand that one is the resource, one is the economics, one is the transportation, and one is to ensure that the NEBA is in place. NEBA is the net environmental benefits. As the Deputy Director General Operations of the Indian Coast Guard, it's a struggle to get a contingency plan approved. Because if the plan comes, it will not have NEBA. If the NEBA is coming, there will be no equipments. If both are there, it's not even considerate to the type of oil that they are going to handle. It is just a plan. So if all these things are not there, then that rare accident which will happen is going to be extremely costly to you, not by money, but by history, by documentation, and the laws of the nature which will take many decades to rehabilitate itself. It's very important for all of us to think through. Please look at the coastline of India. I've come down to national, then I'll address regional and international. We are having 1,300 islands, and all the heavy VLCCs and ULCCs are transporting itself through Lakshadweep, Minicoy, Andamans. And we cannot afford to have an oil spill because those islands will perish. In fact, gentlemen and ladies, when MT New Diamond happened, when we could bring the fire under control and we had to convey it to some port in Middle East, one of the very conscious decisions taken by us was that it should be transported at a distance by the salvors, which is not going to harm Maldives, Sri Lanka, or India. And in case it happens, what is the response mechanism? So we had a package of ships which were accompanying it, still it left into the real deep oceans. It's a very important point for all of us to understand. And therefore, when we are making our plans, when you are going to make a robust tier 1 response for your area and be responsible for it for maintenance, capital investment, and if it happens, then we have to place ourselves for tier 2 response, be it Coast Guard, or in case we are hiring an OSRO by those agencies. And the whole packaging on a chart, on a paper should be so well done that there is economy of effort. You cannot have equipments not used for 25 years. And you cannot have dispersants which cannot be used at all. So everywhere there is some amount of optimization as a new terminology which I would request Sengupta sir to start including in the OSI, which I would call Oil and Chemical Spill India for Future in its plan process. And let us start working in that direction, because with the expert advice of all of you, probably there will be no oil spill in and around us. There will be no chemical spill. And in case one is there, we will be the first to respond to get that zero tolerance in place very quickly. I also wanted to bring to fore that the Act of Oil Spill Response is a multi-agency act. Nowadays, many activities are multi-agency, multi-construct. Today, the industry representatives of Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas are there. Ministry of Shipping is there. Affected is Ministry of Fisheries. Implementation is by Ministry of Defense. And therefore, every apex meeting of this magnitude has to have representation from all these ministries at all forums, be it governmental or non-governmental, so that the messaging and thinking is common to all of us. Then only solutions will be standardized. In fact, every country makes, there is an international model, but when countries make their own models to their locals, still it has to remain within some basic standards. If I am to go and respond in Mauritius, I should have some idea of what is expected out of me. That's how bilateral, regional, or international cooperation will happen. And I would also make a mention about legalities. Fund will come later. If it is an oil rig, I know where is the spill from. If it's an SPM, I know where is the spill from. But if it's a passing ship, I need to run behind him to find out where it came from. And the legal provisions available are very, very meager. Therefore, if you want to strengthen, we have to have legalities in place, and I'm also just recommending, when it comes to response, if comprehensively every nation is looking at equipments, one is your own perimeter, which is your responsibility, area of responsibility. When it comes to anything common, could there be common funding? Similarly, could there be, if the response strategy is common, can funding be common? If it's a regional level, can funding be common? Otherwise, who is going to do it? Everybody is expecting that let some response happen, then we will see what will happen, then we'll get into legality and run after probably PNI clubs and go for IOPC funds and see how we will claim it, give lot of evidences and go through a lot of time. These are all accidents. Especially Deepwater Horizon has to teach as many lessons which no other oil spill would have ever taught to anybody. Therefore, without taking much time, as a passionate responder, I would like to say that till today, India has been very lucky that we didn't have any major oil spill. Be it Merck's Navigator, which SP sir will bear out on how he had responded, to Dwan Kanchipuram, which happened in the port of Chennai, we have never had a major oil spill. In fact, Bombay High fallout, when there was an oil spill, Sengupta sir was there. So he knows that it could have never reached the shoreline. But if something really major happens with all the international regulations in place, as a team, are we prepared is a very important question. And what could be the quantum and what is the NEBA we have got is all to be thought through. So I would just say that though I have been given 5 minutes, I am sure I overshot it, but I have given a lot of food for thought for all of us to progress to the next conference with very newer ideas. Thank you for the opportunity, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Suresh. Actually, really a lot of food for thoughts, and we have to listen the recording and have to bring out those points for the future conferences as well, and for the awareness of the organizations. Thank you very much. Now I will go to Mr. Richard Johnson. I have to introduce him. Richard is basically a marine biologist with high degree in radiation and environmental protection. And the most important thing, he was associated with the Chernobyl nuclear reactor accident as an investigator. So that's a very, very important thing, and we all know the kind of environmental effect Chernobyl has created in this earth. Richard, you have listened to our previous all speakers here. So as the director of this International Tank Owners Pollution Forum, and you know that India is the third largest consumer of crude oil, and huge this shipping industry, the way it is increasing. Do you expect any major maritime incident to happen? If that, whether India is prepared to handle it?
Thank you. So, is India ready for the next major maritime incident, is the question. Well, it must be. It has to be. There's a responsibility to citizens, coastal dwelling citizens, and to look after the sensitive coastlines, and therefore it's essential that there are good plans in place. We've heard already about shipping, and lots of oil is transported from the Middle East along the axis to the Far East. And so lots of oil is transported along India's coastline. Certainly in excess of 500 million tons of crude or black oil passes the coastline. In previous years, particularly with Somali piracy, those ships hugged closer to the Indian coastline. So we've heard that India hasn't suffered a major incident in the past. And we've heard lots of good things that have been done in India to ensure that the country is ready. And it needs to be. It needs to maintain vigilance and not to be complacent. India itself imports You mentioned 250 million tons of crude black oil. So lots of oil coming into the country. I hear that 1.3 million tons of cargo is handled by Indian ports. So let's not just think about oil. I agree with IG Suresh. Let's think about other ships and other potential pollutants which we need to protect from. It's not just tankers. Tankers carry all types of cargoes, chemicals and H&S. Other vessels carry other cargoes, and they themselves are fueled by bunkers. So we need to be ready. This session is also looking at developments going forwards. So what are the emerging risks? Well, ships are getting bigger for a start. We talk about mega ships, box ships, 20,000 TEU plus. So how do you deal with that? We're already in the realm of IMO 2020 and now dealing with low sulfur fuel oils, which behave differently to the orthodox heavy fuel oils that we know. It's an emerging risk, and that risk profile has changed, so we need to be on top of it and be aware. As we go into decarbonisation, dare I say it, we're looking at hydrogen, ammonium, or biomethanol type bunkers. Again, the risk changes, and therefore any plans that you have need to take that into place. But we start off with to be prepared to have a legal framework. And we talked about that already within the panel. And clearly, India does have a good legal framework. It does have national legislation, and it has ratified a number of international conventions. OPRC, the Oil Pollution Preparedness and Response and Cooperation Convention, has been ratified by India, OPRC, but not OPRC H&S. So good moves being made, but maybe the consideration can be done to ratify that other convention. I don't want to steal the thunder of colleagues on the panel, but other conventions such as CLC and the Fund have clearly been ratified. But dare I mention, what about the Supplementary Fund? And what about the Bunker Convention? So lots of stuff has been done in India, but are we still thinking of ever improving? So that's a little bit on the legal framework. The roles and responsibilities, have they been made clear in India? Who is responsible? Is it the polluter? Is it the government who takes the lead? There is a well-established National Oil Spill Contingency Disaster Plan, and that's important that the roles and responsibilities are set out there, and all stakeholders know their part. It needs to be realistic, and it needs to be exercised and drilled. And I know that the Coast Guard had a national exercise just a couple of months ago, so that you can test it and see where the weaknesses are or the challenges are. Equipment, I don't know exactly where all the equipment is around India, but clearly that's an important thing. We've talked about Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 1 being maybe up to 700 tons, or according to the risk profile, which I think is a really, really important point. And if you don't have enough equipment, and we've certainly seen spills around the world where even large developed countries who we think have great national contingency plans, they need to reach out to get further equipment or further manpower. So these regional agreements, be it SASEP or bilateral agreements, are all very important. And that's between countries and also between industry and government. And I know that Darren talked about your people are all very important. And so training people so that you have good, competent people who know what to do at the time of an incident is all very important. So I do think India is in a reasonable shape. I don't think it can be complacent because of the risk profile that I've mentioned. And I don't think we should always look back in history and say, because it hasn't happened previously, it won't happen again. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Richard, for your final philosophical comment. And we all agree with that. And so we should not take it easily. The awareness should be improved further. More technology has to be brought into the country, keeping not only the oil, you mentioned about the total cargo this country is importing. Mr. Suresh has mentioned about the chemicals as well, which is equally dangerous from the environmental point of view. So thank you very much for bringing all those points for that. Now I will come to Sue. Madam, you have heard from all the Indian, I think, counterparts who are representing a different industry from upstream, midstream, then the responder, how they are working on different this thing and the regulations. As a senior representative from this international group of P&I clubs, how do you feel that India should remain engaged into this international space basically what India can further do to maintain its stature in this space for handling these issues? Your observation and comments.
Thank you. It's been very interesting, certainly for me, listening to my fellow panelists who've made some very good observations, which I fully agree. And I think the focus has been very much on prevention and preparedness. And I think on the prevention side, certainly as a group, we do work very closely with ship owners to try and look at safety standards and improvements. But as I think everybody has recognized, that whatever steps you take, unfortunately, accidents do happen. They can happen anywhere and at any time and to anybody. And so preparedness is, of course, very important. And that comes in many different shapes and sizes. Again, we've talked a lot about the technical and practical side, and I don't propose to say anything on that. I defer to the other experts around me. But preparedness also comes in the form of the regulatory and legal framework. And I think as Richard has already touched upon, it is very important that India has already made very good steps towards acceding to and becoming signatories to international conventions, the IMO conventions. But we would encourage all states to ratify the full suite of IMO conventions, and that includes not only the CLC and the Fund Convention, but also the Supplementary Fund and the Bunkers Convention, being the ones focused particularly on oil. As many of you here will already be aware, the Supplementary Fund provides an additional third tier of compensation above that provided by the Fund Convention, up to a maximum of $1 billion. Excuse me. The Fund Convention can provide this third tier for the largest of spills that might occur. Now, so far, thankfully, there has not been a spill that has engaged the Supplementary Fund. But with ever-increasing volumes of oil traveling around the world, and as I think, again, we've all agreed, with ever-increasing volumes of oil entering Indian waters, into Indian ports, the risk of a significant spill is unfortunately around the corner. And the best thing you can do to be prepared is to try and have the best opportunity of proper systems and compensation in place. So we would very much encourage India to consider acceding to the Supplementary Fund as well. Also, as many of you will be aware, the CLC, the Fund Convention and the Supplementary Fund, they only apply to tankers, and only to tankers that are actually carrying hydrocarbon, persistent hydrocarbon mineral oils as cargo. They don't apply in the case of non-tankers, nor do they apply in the case of tankers that do not have oil cargoes or residues on board. That is where the Bunkers Convention comes in. Now, the Bunkers Convention is in many ways similar to CLC. It is based on strict liability for the ship owner in exchange for a limit of liability. However, it only provides a one-tier system that is paid for by the ship owners. So there is no impact on the oil industry or requirement to pay under the Bunker Convention. And it is very important, as my fellow panelists have said, to not just focus on tankers, to look at all types of vessels. And these days, with increasingly larger vessels, with increasingly higher volumes of bunkers on board, risks from bunker spills are increasing. And indeed, Richard from ITOF very kindly provided me recently with some statistics to say that of all the spills that they attend, currently approximately 2/3 of those spills relate to non-tank vessels, i.e. bunker spills, and only 1/3 to tanker spills. So it is a very, very important area. And I think it's just worth saying in response to other comments, really, the two driving forces behind the IMO conventions are balance and compensation of victims, and proper compensation of victims. The conventions are designed, particularly CLC and the Supplementary Fund and the Fund Convention, to balance the risk and to balance the cost between ship owner and the oil industry. One example of this comes with the Supplementary Fund, which I've said is up to $1 billion. Now, in order to maintain this balance, the members, the ship owner members of the International Group of P&I Clubs agreed a voluntary agreement by which they will recompense the Supplementary Fund for 50% of anything that is paid. Now, again, the idea behind this is that there is balance, and that agreement has a mechanism for review, so that if that balance shifts, and if the ship owners are paying too much over time, or if the oil industry is paying too much over time, there can be a redress of that balance, so that the consequences of these incidents are shared amongst those stakeholders who have an interest in the movement of oil and the consumption of oil around the world. So, in conclusion, the group would fully endorse India looking further at signing and acceding to the full suite of IMO conventions in order to give full and proper protection for when, unfortunately, accidents do happen.
Thank you very much, Sue, for your comments from the P&I Club on the liabilities, on the compensation, funding, and one very interesting data you have just mentioned about the spill. 2/3 of the spill are the non-tanker spill. You mentioned, I think 1/3 is the tanker spill, right? So that's an important message for the people who are operating the oil fields. 2/3 are the non-tanker spill. So throughout the OE, you have to be very careful on those areas. Thank you very much for your comments. Now, our last speaker today is Gautam Sivertsen. He is currently director of IOPC firm. He has taken over, I think, in January 2022. But previously, actually, he is having a very strong experience. He was the director maritime department of Norwegian government, and having a huge experience on this issue of maritime law, rules, and seafarers issues. So, Gautam, as the now in a new role of the IOPC funds convention, so what are the future challenges you find in this liability and compensation regime, and how you are thinking it can be further resolved?
Well, thank you for the introduction and the question, sir. Let me first echo the words from Sue Watkins from the P&I Clubs about the legal framework I think it's very important for India to consider the Bunkers Convention and also to consider the Supplementary Fund Convention. And as you heard, the P&I clubs just offered to pay 50% of the costs of the supplementary fund. Of course, that's not new, but it's something to be considered when the Indian stakeholders look at whether to sign up to the supplementary fund or not. So with regard to the future challenges for the IPC fund, I would like to mention the insurers, not the P&I clubs, but the other insurers. And that has been the non-P&I insurers have given rise to some concern in some incidents. As we have very good cooperation with the international group clubs and those insurers, we have faced problems with some of the non-IG insurers. And this is a concern for the member states and for the contributors to the fund, because in certain instances we have been forced to pay from the first dollar up. So instead of the insurer paying the first tier, we have had to intervene and pay from the first dollar. And of course, our contributors are not happy about that. So there is a focus on how can we address the problem with unreliable insurers. And that problem has now been debated in the IPC fund and has been forwarded to the IMO, to the legal committee, and there's a special working group dealing with that right now. And both me and of course, member states, we are interested to see the results that are coming out of this working group. But already now, some of the non-IG clubs, the quality operators, are looking to form an association of quality non-IG insurers. I think that's very encouraging. So the unreliable insurer is a challenge for us. And of course, this problem is only exacerbated by the sanctions regime. There are sanctions against Venezuela, against Iran, and against Russia. And I'm not speaking about whether sanctions are good or bad. I'm merely stating that it entails some problems because some insurers and some classification societies and some ship owners will not be able to carry, to insure ships, to class them, or to sail with those cargoes. That means that the choice of operators that you can choose from, if you want those sanctioned oils, are more limited. And of course, that means that there may be lesser safety standards. So it's a concern that some of the movements of oil against the sanctions are using not best quality operators. So it's a concern expressed by the member states, and it's a concern that we have. So member states are encouraged to be extra vigilant in their port state controls and in issuing flag state certificates to those operators. So that is another concern that we have. So I'll limit at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sivertsen, for your, I think, very in-depth knowledge on this issue. And specifically, this is a very genuine issue at this point of time throughout the world. Not only in your sector, there are so many other sectors where the sanction is creating a huge problem for a kind of structured business into the same segment, because this really hampers the kind of understanding with different kind of owners who are operating from those countries. So I think we are running short of time, ladies and gentlemen. We were supposed to finish it at 12, but we have started at 11:30. And it's almost 12:40 now, and the next session, people are waiting, and after that, the lunch is there. So I will not be able to take the second round of questions. So I think you must have got some essence of the entire value chain of this industry. starting from upstream, downstream, different legality, responders view, the kind of insurance policies are there, the kind of funding, the technology provider like OSRL, ITOPF, how the tanker owners federation, they are thinking about the current condition of India and how they can help you. This is most important. These gentlemen who have traveled from different parts of the world, they are having their exhibitions outside, and they will be available here for the next 2 days. Whoever is interested to speak to them one-to-one, you can talk to them, share your kind of queries and what help you can require in your industry, and they are ready to support you. You can visit their stall over there. So with that note, I think we have to finish this session, the first panel session today on the outlook and development, global, regional and national. And we have tried to bring some of the issues globally, nationally and also regionally. And there are, off the track I was talking to Mr. Suresh, there are a lot of regional things to be developed, and we'll discuss it internally further. So thank you all the panelists over here. I think give a big round of applause to all of them.
Oil Spill India 2022 is dedicated to the Honorable Prime Minister's Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and Clean Seas.